Am I the asshole for refusing to help my family after they sold my house while I was deployed and kept the money? Hey, before we move on to the video, please subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. It will help us create more interesting videos for you. Thanks. I'm still shaking as I write this. I never thought my own family could betray me like this, but here we are. I need to know if I'm crazy or if what happened to me is as messed up as I think it is. Some background. I'm 28 years old and I've been in the Army for 6 years. I bought my first house when I was 24 using my VA loan benefits. It wasn't anything fancy, just a modest 3-bedroom ranch in a decent neighborhood about 20 minutes from base. But it was mine. I worked my ass off to afford it, saved every penny I could, and I was so proud when I got those keys. I spent 2 years fixing it up, painting every room, redoing the kitchen, building a deck in the backyard. That house was my sanctuary, my first real adult accomplishment. My parents are Rebecca and Thomas, and I also have 2 siblings. My older brother Marcus, who's 31, and my younger sister Jade, who's 25. We were never super close growing up, but I thought we had a normal family relationship. My parents always seemed proud of my military service, at least that's what they told me. Marcus has struggled with keeping jobs his whole adult life and has been living with our parents on and off for years. Jade just finished grad school with massive student loans and was also living at home while job hunting. In March of last year, I got orders for a deployment to Eastern Europe. It was going to be for 12 months, and I knew I needed to make arrangements for my house. I couldn't afford to keep paying the mortgage while deployed without having rental income, but I also didn't want to deal with the hassle of being a landlord from overseas. After talking it over with my parents, we came up with what seemed like a reasonable solution. My dad suggested that I give him power of attorney so he could handle any issues that came up with the house while I was gone. He said they could check on it periodically, handle any maintenance emergencies, and if I decided I wanted to rent it out, he could manage that process for me. It seemed logical since they only lived about an hour away from my place. My mom was enthusiastic about the idea, saying how proud she was that I trusted them with something so important, and how they wanted to help their son who was serving his country. I should have seen the red flags, but I was stressed about the deployment and touched that my parents seemed so eager to help. I went to a lawyer and set up a power of attorney document that gave my father authority to make decisions about the house in my absence. I specifically remember the lawyer asking if I wanted to put any limitations on the power of attorney, and my dad jumped in saying that wouldn't be necessary since they just wanted to be able to handle emergencies. Like an idiot, I agreed. Before I left, I gave my parents a spare key and showed my dad where all the important paperwork was filed. I had about $15,000 in equity in the house at that point. I told them that if any major repairs came up that cost more than $500, they should call me first. I also mentioned that if the housing market improved while I was gone, we could discuss selling, but that I was planning to live there when I got back since I'd probably be stationed at the same base for another 2 years. The first few months of deployment went fine. My dad would text me occasionally with updates like checked on the house, everything looks good, or had to call a plumber for a small leak, cost $200, handled it. I was grateful and impressed that he was being so responsible about it. I sent him money to cover the mortgage payments and utilities, plus extra for any maintenance costs. I thought everything was going smoothly. Around month 6, the messages from my dad became less frequent. When I asked about the house, he'd give vague responses like, "It's fine," or "Don't worry about it. Focus on your mission." I started to feel uneasy, but I was dealing with a lot of stress at work, and I told myself I was just being paranoid. My parents had never given me any reason not to trust them before. Then in month 8, something happened that should have been a major warning sign. I was video chatting with my mom, and I asked her to swing by the house and show me how my vegetable garden was doing. I'd spent a lot of time building raised beds in the backyard, and I was curious if anything had grown over the summer. My mom got flustered and said she couldn't do it right then, but she'd take pictures next time she was there. She never sent those pictures, and when I brought it up again a few weeks later, she changed the subject. I started trying to call my dad more frequently to check on things, but he was often unavailable or would cut the conversation short. When I did reach him, he seemed evasive about details. I asked if he thought I should come home on leave to check on the house, and he quickly said that wasn't necessary and that I shouldn't waste my leave time since everything was under control. The deployment was scheduled to end in March, and in February, I started making plans for my return. I was so excited to get back to my house, to sleep in my own bed, to start my garden again. I had saved up a good amount of money during the deployment, and I was planning to use some of it to finally redo the master bathroom. I flew back to the States on March 15th and landed at the airport around 6 p.m. I had told my parents what flight I was on, but they said they couldn't pick me up because my dad was having some health issues. No problem, I took a cab and headed straight to my house. I was exhausted but excited to be home. When the cab pulled up to my address, I thought we had made a mistake. There was a different car in my driveway, different curtains in the windows, and the front door was painted a color I'd never seen before. I asked the cab driver to double-check the address, and he confirmed we were in the right place. My heart started pounding. I walked up to the front door and tried my key. It didn't work. The locks had been changed. I rang the doorbell and a middle-aged woman I'd never seen before answered the door. She looked confused and asked if she could help me. I explained that this was my house and asked what was going on. She said she bought the house 6 months ago and had been living there since July. She showed me her deed and everything. I was in complete shock. I called my dad immediately, and he didn't answer. I called my mom, and she didn't answer either. I called Marcus, and he just said, "Oh shit," and hung up on me. Finally, I called Jade, and she reluctantly told me I needed to talk to our parents, but she wouldn't tell me what was going on. I ended up having to get a hotel room that night because I literally had nowhere to go. I'd been planning to stay in my own house, obviously. The next morning, I drove to my parents' house and confronted them. The conversation that followed was the most devastating experience of my life. My dad casually told me that they had sold the house in July because it was just sitting empty and they needed the money for family expenses. He said it like it was the most reasonable thing in the world. I asked him what the hell he was talking about. It was my house, not theirs. He said that technically, with the power of attorney, he had the legal right to sell it, and since I wasn't using it, he made an executive decision to liquidate the asset for the good of the family. I demanded to know what happened to the money from the sale. This is where it gets even worse. The house had sold for $180,000. After paying off my mortgage and closing costs, there was about $55,000 left over. My dad told me that money had been distributed to family members who needed it. Apparently, Marcus had gotten $25,000 to pay off credit card debt and put a down payment on a new truck. Jade had gotten $20,000 to pay off her student loans. My parents had kept $10,000 for management fees and expenses related to handling the sale. They acted like they had done me a huge favor. I completely lost it. I started yelling about how they had stolen from me, how they had sold my house without permission, how I was now homeless because of them. My mom started crying and saying I was being ungrateful, that they had worked so hard to take care of family business while I was away, and that I should be happy that my siblings were in better financial shape now. My dad said I was overreacting and that I could just buy another house with my deployment savings. He said the old house was too much responsibility for someone my age anyway, and now I was free to make a fresh start. He actually used the word free, like being homeless was some kind of gift. I asked how they could possibly think this was okay, and my mom said that family takes care of family, and since I was single with no kids, I didn't need the house as much as Marcus and Jade needed financial help. She said I was being selfish by not seeing how much good the money had done for my siblings. I told them they had committed fraud and theft, and I was going to report them to the police. My dad laughed and said I couldn't do anything because the power of attorney made everything legal. He said I should have been more specific about limitations if I didn't trust them, and that this was a learning experience for me about being more careful with legal documents. The worst part was how they tried to turn it around on me. My mom said I was abandoning my family by being upset, and that my attitude was proof that the military had changed me for the worse. She said the old Marcus and Jade I knew would never be so heartless toward family members who were struggling financially. My dad said I was being dramatic and that real men don't get emotional over money and possessions. I left their house and went straight to a lawyer. Unfortunately, my dad was technically right about the power of attorney. The document I had signed was broad enough to give him the legal authority to sell the house. The lawyer said I might be able to pursue a case based on breach of fiduciary duty, since my dad was supposed to act in my best interest, but it would be expensive to litigate and the outcome wasn't guaranteed. I also went to the police, but they said it was a civil matter since the power of attorney made the sale technically legal. They couldn't press criminal charges for theft or fraud. I was devastated and homeless and broke. I had to use most of my deployment savings to put deposits down on a crappy apartment and buy basic furniture and household items. Everything I had owned was in that house, and now it belonged to strangers. My tools, my furniture, my personal belongings, everything. The new owners said they bought the house furnished and had no idea about the situation. For weeks, I kept thinking this had to be some kind of mistake or misunderstanding. I kept waiting for my parents to call and apologize and figure out how to make it right. But instead, Marcus called me to complain that I was causing family drama and that I should just move on and let bygones be bygones. He said I was being vindictive by staying mad about it. Jade at least seemed somewhat uncomfortable with the situation, but she said she couldn't give back the money because she'd already used it to pay off her loans. She said she felt bad, but that what's done is done, and I needed to focus on the future instead of dwelling on the past. The absolute lowest point came about 2 months later. I got a call from my mom asking if I wanted to come to Marcus's birthday party. She said it like nothing had happened, like we were all just one big happy family. When I said I wasn't ready to pretend everything was normal, she got angry and said I was holding a grudge and tearing the family apart over money. She said that Marcus and Jade were worried about me and wanted to have a relationship with their brother, but I was making it impossible by being stubborn and bitter. She actually said that my refusal to get over it was hurting my siblings more than the house sale had hurt me, because at least I still had my job and my health. That's when I realized that not only did they not feel bad about what they'd done, they actually thought I was the problem for being upset about it. They had convinced themselves that they were the victims in this situation. I told my mom that I needed space and time to process what had happened, and that I wasn't ready to have family gatherings and act like everything was fine. She said I had until Christmas to get my attitude right, or I wouldn't be welcome at family events anymore. She said they had tried to be patient with my tantrum, but enough was enough. I didn't go to Christmas, or Easter, or Marcus's birthday. And honestly, I felt relieved not to be around people who could betray me so casually and then act like I was crazy for being hurt by it. But the story doesn't end there. About 6 months ago, my dad started having serious health problems. He had a heart attack and needed expensive medical procedures that weren't fully covered by his insurance. Suddenly, I started getting calls from family members. First, it was Jade, saying that Dad was asking for me and wanted to reconcile before his surgery. She said family was more important than money and that I should be the bigger person and let go of past grievances. When I said I needed a real apology and acknowledgement of what they'd done wrong before I'd consider rebuilding the relationship, she said I was being unreasonable and holding Dad's health hostage over a business disagreement. Then Marcus called, but not to apologize. He wanted to know if I would be willing to help with Dad's medical bills since I didn't have a family to support and had done well financially since returning from deployment. He said the $25,000 he'd gotten from my house sale was long gone, and he was struggling to contribute to Dad's care. I was speechless. These people had stolen my house, kept the money, and now they wanted me to pay for medical bills with money I'd had to use to rebuild my entire life from scratch. When I said no, Marcus got angry and said I was letting my pride get in the way of helping my father. He said Dad might die, and how would I feel knowing I could have helped but chose not to because of some old drama about a house. My mom called next, and she was crying. She said the medical bills were going to force them into bankruptcy, and she didn't understand how I could watch my family suffer when I had the means to help. She said she knew we'd had disagreements in the past, but family was supposed to be there for each other in times of crisis. Notice how it went from being a business decision to a disagreement to old drama. They couldn't even acknowledge what they'd actually done. The most infuriating part was when my mom said that Dad had provided for me my whole childhood, and now it was my turn to take care of him. She said the house money had gone to help my siblings, but ultimately it was all family money anyway, so I shouldn't think of it as being stolen from me personally. I told her that if Dad wanted my help, he could start by apologizing for selling my house and explaining how he planned to make it right. She said I was being petty and vindictive, and that demanding an apology from a sick man was cruel and heartless. She said that Dad was too proud to beg for forgiveness, but that his health problems had made him realize how important family was. She said he regretted that we'd grown apart, and he wanted to rebuild our relationship, but he couldn't understand why I was so focused on the past instead of moving forward. I asked her if Dad regretted selling my house, and she said he regretted that I was upset about it, but he still believed he'd done what was best for the family at the time. She said he'd made a judgment call in a difficult situation, and while he was sorry it had caused problems, he couldn't change the past. That's not an apology. That's not even close to an apology. The final straw came 3 weeks ago. I got a call from a cousin I barely know, asking if I was really going to let my father die over money. Apparently, my parents had been telling the extended family their version of events, where they had helped manage my finances while I was deployed, and now I was withholding medical support because I was angry about their financial decisions. My cousin said everyone in the family was shocked by my behavior and that my grandparents were heartbroken that I'd turned my back on my parents in their time of need. She said people were starting to think the military had changed me into someone cold and selfish. I realized they had been systematically turning my entire extended family against me by framing the situation as a minor financial disagreement rather than the massive betrayal it actually was. They made it sound like I was holding a grudge over a small amount of money, not that they had literally stolen my house and left me homeless. I tried to explain the real story to my cousin, but she said she didn't want to get involved in family financial drama, and that regardless of what had happened, I should still help with Dad's medical bills because he was my father. Last week, I got a Facebook message from my high school friend who still lives in my hometown. She said she'd heard my dad was sick and she was sorry to hear about the family problems. Then she said something that made my blood boil. She'd heard from mutual friends that I'd gotten greedy after my deployment and had sued my own parents over money. That's when I realized the rumors had spread beyond the family. My parents had apparently told people that I was taking legal action against them over financial disagreements. And now half my hometown thinks I'm some kind of monster who attacks his own family over money. I decided I needed to tell my side of the story, so I wrote a long Facebook post explaining what had actually happened. I didn't use names, but I laid out the timeline and the facts. I said that my family had sold my house without permission while I was deployed, kept the money, and were now asking me to pay for medical bills after leaving me homeless. The response was mixed. Some people were supportive and said they couldn't believe anyone would do that to a deployed service member. But others said I was airing dirty laundry in public and that family problems should be handled privately. A few people said that regardless of what had happened, I should still help with medical expenses because family comes first. My mom called me that evening, absolutely furious about the Facebook post. She said I was destroying the family's reputation and embarrassing them in front of the whole community. She said Dad's health was getting worse, and the stress of this public humiliation was making things harder for him. She demanded that I delete the post and apologize to the family for spreading lies and causing drama. When I said I hadn't lied about anything, she said my version of events was misleading and made them look like terrible people when they'd only been trying to help. She said that if I really cared about Dad, I would stop punishing the family and focus on what was important. She said the Facebook post proved that I cared more about being right than about my father's life. I told her that I cared about Dad's life, but I also cared about the truth, and I wasn't going to pretend that what they did was okay just to make family gatherings more comfortable. I said that if Dad wanted my help, he could start by acknowledging what he'd done and taking responsibility for it. She hung up on me. 2 days later, I got a text from Marcus saying that Dad had specifically asked him to tell me that he was disappointed in the man I'd become and that he was removing me from his will entirely. Marcus said Dad had hoped I would come to my senses before his surgery, but my Facebook post had shown him that I cared more about public revenge than family loyalty. I haven't heard from any of them since then. Dad's surgery is scheduled for next week, and I honestly don't know how I feel about it. Part of me is terrified that he'll die, and I'll regret not trying harder to reconcile. But a bigger part of me is angry that even facing a life-threatening surgery, he still can't admit that selling my house was wrong. I've been going to therapy to deal with all of this, and my therapist says that I'm not responsible for fixing relationships that other people broke. She says that my family is using Dad's illness to manipulate me into accepting unacceptable behavior, and that real reconciliation would require them to acknowledge the harm they caused and make amends. But I keep second-guessing myself. Maybe I am being too stubborn. Maybe I should just let it go and help with the medical bills because family is more important than money. Maybe I'm letting pride get in the way of doing the right thing. On the other hand, they stole my house. They left me homeless. They gave my money to my siblings and kept some for themselves. They lied to the extended family about what happened. They've never apologized or taken responsibility. And now they want me to pay for medical bills while continuing to act like I'm the problem. I've been thinking about this for months, and I keep coming back to the same question. If I give in now and help with the medical bills, what message does that send? Does it tell them that they can treat me however they want as long as they eventually have a crisis that makes me feel guilty? I don't want my dad to die, but I also don't want to spend the rest of my life being the family ATM for people who have shown they have no respect for me or my property. I don't want to teach them that stealing from me is acceptable as long as they wait long enough for me to get over it. I've worked so hard to rebuild my life after what they did to me. I've managed to save up enough money to put a down payment on another house, and I'm finally starting to feel stable again. But it took 2 years of living in a crappy apartment and working extra jobs to get back on my feet after they left me with nothing. The money they're asking for would wipe out most of my savings. It would set me back years financially. And for what? To help people who have never acknowledged that what they did was wrong, who continue to blame me for the problems they created, and who turn my entire extended family against me. I know this post is incredibly long, but I needed to get the whole story out because I feel like I'm going crazy. Everyone in my family acts like I'm being unreasonable, but I can't shake the feeling that what they did to me was unforgivable. So I guess my question is, AITA for refusing to help with my father's medical bills after my family sold my house while I was deployed and kept the money? Am I being too stubborn and vindictive, or is this a reasonable boundary to maintain? I genuinely don't know anymore. Part of me wonders if the stress and trauma of the deployment messed with my head and made me overreact to what happened. Maybe I should have been more understanding about my family's financial struggles. Maybe I should have been grateful that my siblings got help with their debts. But every time I think about coming home to find strangers living in my house, every time I remember having to sleep in a hotel because my own family had made me homeless, I get angry all over again. Every time I think about my dad casually telling me he'd sold my house like it was no big deal, I feel sick to my stomach. Is it possible for a family relationship to recover from something like this? Can you ever trust people again after they betray you so completely? Or am I holding on to anger that's only hurting me in the long run? I honestly don't know what the right answer is anymore. I just know that I'm tired of being made to feel guilty for being upset about having my life destroyed by the people who were supposed to protect me while I was serving my country. So please, Reddit, tell me, am I the asshole here? Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button.